The cowardice of cutting off. Going no contact with a parent who has offered nothing but love and support is not.
I think I didn't even make it 10 seconds in. So I would love for somebody to respond to this and make the math, make it make sense. Why on earth would anybody cut another person off? Let's leave mother and father out of this. If that person offered nothing but, I'm using her words, love and support. Now let's bring it to the next level. Why would anyone cut off their mother or their father who offered nothing but love and support? We are born unconditionally loving our parents in the purest form in the universe and beyond. What would drive a person to cut off their parent if that was true? I literally would love to see what you think about that in the comment section. And I always read them. I always read through the comments. And I'm sorry that oftentimes I don't have more time than to drop a heart to let you know I read them. I moderate my own platform. And so, time being what it is, I either spend time making videos or I spend time typing back in the comment section. I want to tell you that I wish that I had the time to do all of it. And the reason that I'm pointing that out is because I want you to know I'm the one reading them and you are important to me. Our community is important to me. Is there anyone out there that has an answer to this that actually, makes sense? Okay, 10 seconds in. I'm scared.
Is not an act of courage. It is.
Oh my goodness. Are any of us really focused on the act of courage, or are we focused on our survival from the parent who is supposed to be the one who offers us nothing but love and support? And when we have to distance ourselves or go completely no contact, whatever that looks like, that isn't about courage. That is about survival. Most of the time it's about emotional survival, and a lot of the time also it is about physical survival. It's about the protection of our well-being. It is about the protection of our children. Some of us don't go no contact until we have children of our own. Was anybody out there thinking, oh, I'm courageous that I went no contact? I'm not saying that it doesn't take courage to be able to walk away from a relationship that you really want to be a certain way so badly. You know what I mean? I wish that my mother was what she is describing, or at least something close to it, so that I would have never had to walk away. I had to walk away from the hope. I had to let go of the hope of what I knew was never going to come to be. And I knew that I could not stay in that hope, especially because I did this for my children because of the triangulation that she was perpetrating between my children, between myself and my children. I had to walk away in order to do what was right as a mom. I had to ignore my feelings around the hope that maybe one day and just let go. And okay, that takes courage. However, that's not the focus. I'm going to try to get through more than 10 seconds. And just so you know, if you're new here, I do play the entire videos of anybody that I feature at the end so that you can see it all the way through, so that you can also see that I didn't edit anything to make it meet my narrative. I don't have a narrative other than healing, if that's a narrative. I guess that is.
It is a quiet retreat disguised as awakening. A step taken not towards healing, but away from the discomfort of self-reflection.
The way that we get to self-reflect I was going to say self-respect. There is self-respect in there, not to be involved with someone who is harming you. We have to have a level of self-love, of self-respect to be able to do that. In order, though, I think a lot of times to be able to self-reflect, we do have to distance ourselves from things that keep our focus in the wrong direction. And it's interesting to me that those are like, that's the choice of description of words that she's using. I have obviously a hair stack and I'm just going with this. Anyway, because what people that are abusive or that are focused on being in control over another person, whatever that looks like, do is they create a situation where they are the focus. And you don't have an opportunity to self-reflect, to go, is it me? Is it them? What is my contribution? Do I have a contribution? You know, having that distance actually allows us the space to look at ourselves, to look at who we are in our relationships and who we would like to be and all the things that are mixed up in there. And unfortunately for people like this, that time of self-reflection allows us to know that they are going to behave that way with anybody who is their offspring. I'm not going to say they behave that way, whatever her behavior is. I think it will become apparent with everybody at large, because we know that that's not true. If you are the offspring, the son, the daughter of somebody who is showing emotional immaturity, someone who's narcissistic, someone who has toxic behaviors, things like that, then you know that you're the one who is the recipient of the majority of that in a way that nobody else is. And that's because they treat us like we are their property, and they are entitled to treat us any way that they choose. And they are pretty short-sighted thinkers. They don't think about how things will age, particularly if there's somebody who really believes that they are all powerful, right? That they will never lose that level of power over their offspring, their daughter, their son. And so when you look at the way that they treat us, they don't treat other people in the same way, not because they don't feel entitled to, rather because they are aware that they have to nurture enough of their likability for that person to have tolerance for them. We are trained to have tolerance for them. We are conditioned to believe that that treatment that they have shown us, given us, perpetrated upon us is normal, and that's just what parents do. And oftentimes, and I can see it in something about her, I have watched a little bit of her content. There is no question in my mind that that is her conditioning that she has passed down. That is her belief system that she has passed down. I don't know if she has relationships with her parents. I don't know if they are alive. I do know enough of her backstory to see that she comes from trauma. She married somebody who replicated the love that she knew. And so because she probably didn't separate from her parents, and I'm 99% sure, she could not and cannot understand why her children would do that to her. And that's a lot of the times part of the problem. She expects her children to tolerate. She probably did better than her parents. And that's why, because she tolerated her parents, because they're her parents after all.
It's easier to hide behind fashionable language than to confront the complexity of one's own heart. Many call this distance healing. Yet so...
I'm sorry, I've never heard that before. Can somebody, I might even Google it. I've never heard that terminology, distance healing. So if many are calling it that, and given that I spent a lot of time in the social media world doing this, I don't see, where that came from. She also sounds, well, she is reading off of something. She is a writer. However, it also sounds kind of AI-ish to me. Not that they're not her thoughts, though. I mean, we can use AI and, because we feed our thoughts in it, it spits something out. Unfortunately, it doesn't usually sound genuine or even all that clever oftentimes, but maybe it's what you're feeding in that it's being based on. I use AI for titles and things like that, but I don't use AI for anything that I do. And I rarely script anything. And if I do, it's because I'm doing bullet points of notes. And anyone who's been with me for a while, you know that. I like to keep it real, and this is how I'm feeling. Distance healing. No, actually what I call it, I'm not representing many. What I call it is healing while you're no longer being set on fire. And the reason I look at it that way is because if you're on fire and you go to an emergency room and you're in flames, what do? They put out the fire so that they can treat the wounds, because you can't treat the wounds while they're being set on fire. That isn't to say that you can't work on your healing and your growth while you're in relationships with, somebody who is harming you. It is to say it's not ideal. It's just not. Sometimes, though, it is necessary. Sometimes it's necessary for a person while they're in it. I mean, listen, I'd rather a person while they're in it come to therapy than wait until they're out of it to come to therapy. I'd rather them do that and figure out what's best for them than spend time without any support. So there is that. However, when we're really talking about getting into a place where we are seeing things clearly, where we're grounded, where our nervous system isn't being destabilized, a lot of times it's necessary to create some sort of distance. It doesn't mean no contact. I'm not here telling people to do one thing or the other, by the way. That is not my function. I'm a therapist. What I do is I help you learn to love yourself so that you can make good decisions for yourself that you trust. Because when we love ourselves, we trust ourselves. We stop gaslighting ourselves, all that sort of thing. I'm here to help you develop the tools that you need for you. Period. End of story. And if those tools and that self-love and that unwillingness to abandon and betray yourself as they're getting developed through that self-love cause you to make decisions about the relationships in your life, which oftentimes it does, that's just part of what happens when we come into our own and we actually have a standard for who we allow to have access to us. If the people that we are allowing access to us are healthy and loving and kind, it makes sense. And if they aren't, well, then why are we allowing access? It's based on their behavior, not ours, right? I didn't walk away because of my behavior. I walked away because of my mother's behavior. Plain and simple. Okay, let's continue on with her.
Yet so often it's simply avoidance dressed in the vocabulary of modern therapy. These are not boundaries thoughtfully set. They are bridges deliberately burned. And the rising smoke, mistaken for freedom, is, in truth, the evidence of something precious lost. The voices in the background.
It is the evidence of something precious lost. While she's trying to sound very profound. Anyway, it is. Ending up going no contact is the evidence of what we lost in that relationship, not what we were gaining from that relationship. The evidence of my losses, for example, I didn't have a childhood, I had a traumahood. I was never a carefree, open child. I was a shut down, dissociated child. I lost my innocence. My mother took that from me. My grandparents took that from me. Other perpetrators that I was pre-groomed for took that from me. I lost the ability to be innocent and naive and carefree in so many ways that we are all born with. That is the evidence of the loss. I lost every single time I was harmed by my parents and my grandparents, whatever my future was going to be. because it took something away from me that altered the course of my life. I lost being able to know what it is I would have followed in terms of my path had I had a supportive, loving, and safe home. I lost the ability to realize the dreams that I did have because my mother took those away from me. I lost the ability to go to high school because the abuse was so bad that I ran away from home and ended up living on the streets at 13. I lost prom, I lost homecoming, I lost all the normal milestones that so many people take for granted as a direct result of the abuse that I was experiencing. I lost the ability to decide when I was going to have my first baby after finding the love of my life and getting married to somebody healthy, because I got pregnant at 16 as a runaway. I gained a beautiful child. She's not a child, she's an adult, beautiful daughter, and I'm forever grateful for her. And she did save my life because she made me show up for her in a way that I would have never shown up for myself. Nonetheless, I lost all of the milestones that most people take for granted. So yes, it is evidence of what is lost. Not sure that's what she was looking for in that statement. Actually, I'm sure that's not what she was looking for. It bears being said, though.
The voices in the background who encourage this severing, the influencers, the commentators, even some therapists, often do so not out of wisdom, but out of convenience. They feed on discontent, turning ordinary...
What is convenient about going no contact? I'm really curious about that. How is that convenient? How is it convenient when you go no contact and the entire group of relatives, because this is what happens in narcissistic family systems, stand with the person you went no contact from? You didn't sever everybody. What is convenient about that? What is good about that? What is desirable about that? What is, like, I didn't dream as a little child that I would grow up and have no family. I have my children. Well, really, my children have me. My adult son and daughters and grandsons have me. What is convenient about that? Oh, misery loves company? No. That is some projection right there. You know how I know? Because she's got a group and she's in a group of all the estranged parents doing all the things, and they're all supporting each other's rhetoric that keep them estranged. Repair can be had. Not if you're following that rhetoric and drinking that Kool-Aid. It will never happen. Instead of looking for repair, she's regurgitating what is being said by all of the estranged parents that are like her. What's their common thread? Blame everybody else and take zero accountability and don't self-reflect. Right? That's their biggest common thread. Misery loves company. Yes, it does, ma'am.
Turning ordinary family struggles into narratives of pathology. In their hands, alienation.
I would like to hear her define ordinary family struggles. And see, this is where I know it gets a little bit sticky, because clearly she hasn't done therapy to know the difference. And if she has done therapy, she hasn't learned the difference. She wasn't listening, or maybe it wasn't pointed out to her. Ordinary family struggle. You have an argument over something minor and you resolve the conflict. I can't even speak. She's got me on fire. I'm snarky sparky too. So look out, peeps. Ordinary family struggles. I've had conflict with my children. When they were children, I've had conflict with them as adults, and we resolve it. We talk about it. Ordinary family struggles implies, in my mind, that you have a disagreement about something and you work through it because everybody is listening and working towards the same goal and understands that they're on the same team. the team of they love each other, they care for each other, and you can disagree about something and work through it. It's not about your character. It's not about, you being a bad person. It's about, hey, you hurt my feelings when you did that, and being able to work through that. Respecting boundaries, stuff like that. When it stops being ordinary family struggles is when you have somebody who doesn't want to take accountability. And how do I know she doesn't want to take accountability? Because I haven't heard her say anything, and maybe she will, but I doubt it, about how some parents, don't listen to you. She's just blanketing it with this sort of leaving a loving and caring parent without even recognizing that doesn't even make sense. She's blaming everything, the internet, the influencers, the therapist, the this, the that. And here's the thing about blaming other things outside of yourself when things go sideways, no matter what the situation. We cannot heal what we don't take accountability for. It is the most disempowering thing you can do to yourself. If you can look within and see what your part to play is in a situation and adjust your behaviors accordingly, and that doesn't mean give up yourself, that doesn't mean betray yourself, that doesn't mean abandon yourself. It means take stock and take a good look and see where your power lies. You can repair what's going on. If you're blaming an outside source without the willingness to take any accountability, then you're not ever going to be able to heal what's going on. And look, relationships are complex, right? That doesn't mean they have to be difficult.
In their hands, alienation becomes a trend, and estrangement a kind of performance. This culture of disconnection is a subtle toxin, or a poison, or a cancer. It elevates fragility, celebrates victimhood.
It elevates fragility. No, you know what elevates fragility to an immeasurable degree? Having a parent who systematically destroys your self-esteem or even prevents it from developing. That's actually what elevates fragility. Having a person, even not a parent, but especially a parent, who sabotages your success, who is critical, who is demeaning, who is invalidating. That's what develops and elevates fragility. And I have to wonder, because it's an interesting choice of words, if she isn't following Dr. Joshua Coleman, who basically says that kids of today are emotionally fragile without acknowledging how that might happen. And by the way, I'll take being called a kid of today. However, I went no contact over 30 years ago. So there's that.
And casts suspicion on the very people who once carried, protected, and sacrificed.
She had to put in sacrifice. Enough said. I just had to, highlight it. She had to put it in there. Of course she did. And carried you. The guilt. Oy, let's bring in the guilt, shall we? You chose to have children. That's not our responsibility.
What previous generations understood as the natural friction of family life, the imperfect exchanges that forged resilience, is now too quickly labeled as trauma, a word used to absolve rather than understand.
Children should not have to become resilient because of how their parents treat them.
And so, the silence grows. And first it feels like power, a reclaiming of space. But eventually, silence reveals its truer nature, not empowerment, but absence. A void where love, guidance, and history once lived. So perhaps the truth is simpler than we make it. Parents cannot be loved for the ideal we invent. They can only be loved for who they are, shaped by their own time, their own hardships, and their own imperfect humanity. That does not make them toxic. It simply makes them human. If this pattern continues, one must wonder, what will the next generation call their parents when the cycle turns? What monsters will they invent to avoid seeing themselves? God bless.
Wow. The threat. What will the next generation, do and think? And what stories will they invent? And will they be stuck in their victimhood? Like all the things. Wow. Well, as someone who's been no contact for over 30 years, and I have 3 adult children, they're all thriving and doing extremely well, and we're all in relationships. So I don't know what to tell you. In the comment section, if you have adult sons, daughters, offspring, tell me how your estrangement impacted them. My estrangement impacted them in a few different ways. We talked about it. The best way it impacted them was it shielded them from being destroyed. I mean, and I'm laughing about it. It's not funny. My son was being taught by my mother that he was worthless because she ignored him and actually disliked him. I could see it on her face, and she would, get him things that didn't fit, that weren't age appropriate, while she would get my daughter things that were amazing and, expensive and really showing I see this one, I don't see this one. She was playing all sorts of toxic games with my children. And that's why I went no contact. They were around the ages of 6 and 2.5 when I went no contact. I didn't go no contact for me. I didn't know that I deserved any better than the way that my mother treated me. My children were shielded from the dysfunction of my family. They were shielded from a child emmer as well. Well, really too, I throw my grandmother in there. She's a facilitator, so she counts. Up close and personal. My children have all learned that you don't stay in relationships where there isn't safety, where there isn't the feelings of being cherished, seen, and safe. End of story. That's it. It doesn't matter who you are. You're not entitled to a relationship if you're not treating the person well. That's what they all learned, every single one of them. And now I have grandchildren, one of which is 19 and my younger grandson is 16-ish. I say 16-ish because I don't age my children. I will walk around calling my eldest daughter 41 only to realize, no, she's 42 now. So it's not that I don't know the ages of my children and my grandchildren. I just don't age them. Anyway, all that to be said, they all understand that you get to choose the relationships that you want to maintain and be in. And that is based on the health of the relationship. How about you? What did your kids learn? And I say it was a mixed bag. I just want to highlight that one of my daughters, my youngest daughter, actually said to me, she goes, I didn't miss out on anything with your family. However, I do wish that I had that cousin experience that I see other families have. And I wish they had that. I wished I had that. And I come from a large family where that would have been the case. Unfortunately, my mother and my grandparents made that impossible, and everybody else chose to align with them. So, that's where we ended up. I didn't have control over that. Okay, let's see what else we've got with her.
Manipulative children are experts at twisting your words, twisting your intentions, twisting your memories. They'll say, "You're crazy. You always overreact. You're the problem." But this isn't truth, it's control. If a child constantly makes you doubt your reality, you're not unstable. You're being emotionally manipulated.
I'm so glad she scripted that so she could remember what she needed to say. What I'm hearing in that, tell me what you're hearing. What I'm hearing is that she has a child or children, adults. I know she has an adult daughter for sure because she was at the adult daughter's wedding. I don't know how many years ago. I did try to deep dive into her a little bit. And I think I'm going to continue with her just a little bit more after this video because she wrote I think she wrote 3 books. And I think that there's stuff to dive into there, that we might all want to see. And if there's not, well, then we won't see any more of her. I'd like to not see any more of her. But at the same time, these videos that I create highlighting estranged parents' behavior, I know they are very healing for many people. I know that seeing the patterns of behavior get exposed in this way is something that I wish I had had, because her voice, her expression is a lot like my own mother's, right? And to be able to see that come out of the dark into the light in their own words is very healing. And it's also frustrating. Like at the same time, it's like, why don't you want to get it? You know, there's moving pieces in there. Anyway, could it be that her adult offspring are saying, you know, you did this hurt me. I need you to take accountability for this. And they're on repeat with it. And it's the same story. And she's going, that didn't happen. And so now she's feeling like she's being gaslit, which is probably her specialty. Could that be the case? Could it be that she's doing I don't remember it that way, or you're remembering it wrong, and they're not willing to let it go until she takes accountability, and that's seen as manipulation? Could it be? I don't know. What do you think she means by what she's saying? I'm really curious to know. All right, I've got a few more in here.
Toxic children never take responsibility. Everything is your fault. Their emotions, their failures, their choices. Blame becomes their identity. But you can't carry their adulthood on your shoulders. They are responsible for their lives, not you. And unless they learn to take accountability for the abuse that they have delivered, they will never, ever have peace.
So wait a minute, we're not allowed to call them toxic, because there's some things in here, I think screenshots and stuff that I'll show. We're not allowed to say your behavior is toxic, but we're toxic children. Am I getting that right? And we're supposed to take accountability for our adult lives and for the childhood that you turned into a traumahood. I'm not saying she did that, although it kind of sounds to me like she did. When are we not taking accountability and responsibility? I say this all the time. We were blamed for how they treated us, how they harmed us, that we deserved that treatment because we were difficult children, we were bad children, all the things. You know, we didn't love them the way they needed to be loved and admired and adored and all the things. So we're at fault for whatever their frustrations were that they took out on us. And then the minute we turned into adults at 18, we're now responsible for what our life looks like, even though they set us out into the world with the greatest disadvantage. We're now accountable for that as well. So all the choices that we make based on what we learned from our value, from the value that they taught us we didn't have, we are now responsible for. Just like that, on a dime. Where's the space where you heal what you hurt, what you did? Where is that space in between those two portions of our life where someone like my mother is taking accountability for the needs that were not met, for the love that was not provided? Where does that exist? This sounds so much like a letter my mother wrote me. I will not be a part of your blaming process for where your life is, kind of thing. I mean, I'm almost quoting the letter. And I'll link the video in the description of this video. I hope I remember to do it. Sometimes I don't. If I don't, comment in and I'll make sure I put the link in. most of us, many of us, after all of this, after being held responsible for the way that I was treated as a child, and then being held responsible for my choices as a young adult who was doing the love she knew, who didn't know she was worth more, who couldn't identify a healthy relationship, all the things, I then took that as my responsibility and went into therapy so that I could do better. So where is it that we don't take responsibility and accountability? And where is it that they do? I would like to know. I would like that math to math. How dare she? I am beyond snarky sparky now. Like, how dare she?
There comes a moment where you reach your limit, not because you stopped loving your child, but because you stopped allowing their behavior to destroy you. That moment.
Wait a minute. Is she talking about going no contact with her child or children? I didn't really listen to this video when I screen recorded it, but this is what it's sounding like. So hold on a minute. In the first video that I played of her, we're being told that if we go no contact, it's because of influencers, it's because of therapists, it's because of the internet, it's because it's a trend, it isn't courageous, it is all the things bad, we're giving up on the relationship for normal family stuff and all the things. Remember that? Remember the first video that she played?
That moment doesn't make you cruel, it makes you courageous. It's called self-respect. This next topic is a little bit contradictory for me because it's about individual situations. They're not all the same and we cannot generalize. But if you have a very, very toxic child, don't feel bad about going no contact. Because at the end of the day,
what the actual fuck? Let me play you a little snippet. Let's go back to the beginning for a second.
The cowardice of cutting off. Going no contact with a parent who has offered nothing but love and support is not an act of courage. It is a quiet retreat disguised as awakening. A step taken not towards healing, but away from the discomfort of self-reflection.
Okay, now let's finish out with this one.
Because at the end of the day, the child should be respecting the parent, not the other way around.
And there you have it. There you have it. So it's okay for her to decide that her child is toxic, that it isn't just regular family, conflict. Not every situation is the same. It's okay for her to use the terminology that she will not accept from adult sons and daughters and offspring towards her children, towards her adult daughters, sons, offspring. I don't know who she's got no contact with. I'm definitely diving into her. I am definitely diving into her. It's okay for her. It might seem a little hypocritical. No, ma'am, it is completely hypocritical. The rules do not apply to me. That is what she is really saying. And she deserves respect because she's the parent. No, what she's looking for is obedience. What she's looking for is to avoid accountability. What she's looking for is a bobblehead of an offspring who never tells her what she did wrong, so that she never has to take accountability. Wow.
A parent cannot respect a child who has no respect. It's impossible. The only thing that's going to happen is you're going to blow up. And then you blow up and they call you toxic. So people judge parents who go no contact, but don't really know the story.
Is it me or is she talking in circles? Respect is mutual in all relationships. It's not a matter of age. In healthy relationships, respect is mutual because respect is not obedience. Respect is holding space and providing care and, being a safe person. Respect is listening. Respect is working not to react. Respect is taking accountability. I'm just like, wow, she's killing me.
And nobody sees what they endured behind closed doors.
Is it me or is she talking in circles? Respect is mutual in all relationships. It's not a matter of age. In healthy relationships, respect is mutual because respect is not obedience. Respect is holding space and providing care and, being a safe person. Respect is listening. Respect is working not to react. Respect is taking accountability. I'm just like, wow, she's killing me.
And nobody sees what they endured behind closed doors.
Oh, I don't know.
If your child's behavior is destructive, abusive, or damaging, you have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to speak up. Parents don't deserve to be abused.
Okay, do you see how this is about one group of people for her parents, what they do and don't deserve? And it's not about actual relationships. And this goes back to the Oprah episode. If you haven't seen any of my coverage on her, under the Estranged Parents tab, you can find those videos. It goes back to the thing of being more focused on the role than the relationship, which is what Dr. Lindsay Gibson said. And I just thought that was such a great statement. And I so agree with that. The failure to recognize that children are autonomous human beings, just like parents are autonomous human beings, is what creates a lot of the problems. When you can't see that your children, and I'm talking children, so, because I'm trying to be mindful of language, I'm tired of the way that the estranged parents call us children because I feel like they are infantilizing us. I feel like they are not giving us credit for the adults that we have become, right? And that's a part of the problem in how these relationships also break apart, because they are still the parents of children instead of recognizing that role changes. The relationship becomes, you are now the parent of an adult, which means you're no longer parenting the way that you once were. And the way she was parenting, it sounds like, from what it sounds like, her parenting was synonymous with obedience and control, right? The way she talks about respect and things like that. And there is no question that also parents like her and parents who end up particularly in relationships with other toxic people, because we do the love that we know and we raise children within those relationships, we can end up with children who end up being quite narcissistic, who end up with, narcissistic fleas, who end up being difficult. There's no question in their adulthood. Children are not difficult. Let me be very clear. There's no question. There's no question that the dysfunction has a blowback sometimes. You know what I mean? Like where you might have an adult offspring who you can't be in a relationship with. And I don't want to take that out of the mix. It happens. Let's not, though, forget that child didn't turn into that adult without the environment being the main factor in their trajectory in life. So even though you may have to separate from an adult child, and I know that I'm taking a turn here, I also want to be very careful about this, especially if you raise them within a narcissistic family system. That destroys relationships with our own children. That dysfunction nobody gets away unscathed. As the scapegoat, I didn't get away unscathed. I was a very traumatized cookie and definitely a parent who had a lot of emotional immaturity and didn't go to therapy until my oldest pancake was 11. My first pancake was 11. My eldest daughter was 11 years old. And so she got the worst parent of my 3 children. So I point this out because these dynamics are complex. There's no question about it. However, in her case, this isn't the case. And I'll die on the hill of this one. Her inability and refusal to take any accountability, to self-reflect, and she is the victim of all after calling us being stuck in victimhood and everything, does tell a story here, and I'm not buying her bullshit. I just want to make sure that I don't, paint everybody with one brush and baby out with the bathwater, black and white thinking kind of thing. There are different situations that fall into different patterns of behavior. In her case, I have to imagine that she was extremely emotionally abusive to her children because she's online doing it right now for all to see. She's smear campaigning her adult son or daughter, her adult offspring in what she's doing right now. And that tells a story of the kind of mother that she was and likely still is if she has any of her adults left in her life, her offspring.
They deserve emotional safety. Today, children are going for therapy alone, and the therapist guides them and encourages them to cut off their parents. How
do you know that? If you're not going with them, where is the evidence of that? I haven't listened to this whole one, so I don't know if she's going to give evidence. And so for everybody out there, who's watching this video, therapists actually, a lot of times, and I end up with the clients who have gone through this, double down and try to get their clients to stay in relationships with their parents because they're their parents. There are still a lot of therapists out there who push for that relationship to maintain and be intact. And what we're supposed to be doing as therapists is not influencing the way that relationship continues or discontinues, but rather we're supposed to be helping that client understand where their behaviors come from, because oftentimes they come in because they're struggling and maybe their life is in chaos and things like that. And they have behaviors that are detrimental to, them being, them functioning at a better place, right? Being higher functioning. Sometimes they're really high functioning and perfectionistic. So I'm being a little careful how I put that. So let me simplify it. And I think I said it earlier in this video. At the end of the day, when we go to therapy, it's to learn how to trust ourselves, to learn how to value ourselves, to learn how to identify our own core values that we live by, to learn how to create boundaries for ourselves so that we can create boundaries, in our life with our other relationships, to learn how to stop betraying ourselves, to stop abandoning ourselves, basically in a nutshell, to learn how to honor and love ourselves to a degree that we can make healthy decisions, thinking critically rather than being stuck in feelings of guilt and servitude of other people. Learning that prioritizing our needs and our health and our well-being isn't selfish, that we've been taught that, selfish is a bad word. You go to therapy to develop the tools likely that you didn't get to develop in childhood because you had and I'm saying it in this type of therapy. I'm not saying it in terms of, maybe something life coaching and things like that. I'm not saying that everybody who goes to therapy came from a traumatic childhood. That's where I'm going with that. You're learning to develop the self-worth that was missing from your childhood. It should have happened there, right? And so when people come into therapy where they're struggling in their family relationships in particular, let's put it that way, it isn't on the therapist and the therapist. I don't know one therapist who tells somebody, oh, you should cut off your parents. I personally have never done it. I would never do it. And when my clients, some of them take that decision and some of them never take that decision. Some of them won't take that decision. Some of them, don't have to, whatever the case may be. It's not one size fits all. I do remind them when they're struggling with that decision, because sometimes it happens. This is a choice that you get to make in any direction, and you can unblock, you can go back in, you can not go back in. You get to decide. What you need to figure out is what is going to provide you with the most safety for yourself. What is the benefit of being in the relationship or not being in the relationship? You need to look at that for yourself. And where things become more permanent is when you separate from somebody and your life is better without them. That isn't on the therapist. That's not where that happens. Again, the queen of I will never take accountability.
How on earth does a therapist give advice without even knowing the other person? Without even hearing what the other person has to say?
How on earth does a therapist believe the client that's in front of them? I mean, that's what I'm hearing her say. And sometimes I'll have a client say to me, do you believe me? Or, I wonder why you believe me, that sort of thing. And in fact, it happened very recently, and I've had it happen many times where a client says something along those lines. And at the end of the day, why would somebody come into therapy and make up stories about their experiences that they probably didn't even see as abuse because they were normalized? What is the benefit in anybody doing that? Where is that part of what, let her explain. Where's the mathing? And I know I've said that several times in this video, but her figures are so far apart. The bottom line is when somebody comes to me and they're sharing things that are their personal history, of course I believe them. Not because it's my job, but because it's my knowledge that there is no benefit to somebody sitting in front of me, paying me money to listen to them on top of that, and lying. That math will never math. If anything, I find that people have difficulty really understanding how their experiences are valid. If anything, I see clients who go, well, it wasn't that bad. I had a client tell me, my dad used to spank me on occasion. And so my next question was, well, what did that look like? Well, he would take a board and he would beat me with it. Then the language started to change. And I'm like, that's not a spanking. If anything, people will invalidate their own experiences because they were taught that they weren't valid, not the other way around, by people like this, the other side of the story. Sorry, Charlie, but there is no other side of the story in a parent-child dynamic. There is a power dynamic at play there. There is no other fucking side of the story. There is my client's experience. And I don't give a fuck what you have to say. That's the hill that I will die on again. And I know I'm saying that a lot with her, but she's given me a lot of hills to die on. Unbelievable.
A good therapist doesn't take sides. They guide understanding. They don't encourage silence and separation. They encourage clarity and repair.
So 5 minutes ago, she's going no contact with her toxic adult offspring. I guess she might want to be believed in a therapist chair. However, if I have her offspring in my therapy chair, I'm not to believe them without talking to her. What a fucking hypocrite. Calling it as I see it. Fucking hypocrite. Oh, she's got me beyond snarky sparky. I don't even know if there's words. I'm going to have to come up with something new just for her. How dare she? How dare she invalidate survivors of trauma in this way? How dare she smear campaign her own adult offspring? That is what she's doing. Take sides. I do have families. I do have mothers and fathers and many adult offspring, big families. I have all the peoples, and I mostly have them individually, and then I will bring together in the hopes of creating boundaries that lead to repair. I do that. I'm not taking sides. It's not about sides. It's about looking at each person individually and helping them to develop the tools to decide what's best for them. And also helping them to gain self-esteem and emotional maturity so that they're not walking through life in a gigantic reaction, but rather they're walking through life responding. Fucking hell. She's killing me.
Therapy should be a place where families rebuild trust, not reinforce resentment and blame. If the goal is healing, then division should never be the strategy.
Well, first of all, how would she know what therapy is supposed to be? Because it doesn't sound like she's gone. Maybe she should try it out. I wonder what therapists could actually treat her. I really do. There's no way, I have no compassion for her, which is hard for me to say because I'm a very compassionate person and I feel like a bad person saying that. However, I think that she exhibits extremely narcissistic, toxic viewpoints, and I'm just not okay with her, and I'm okay with that. See, look, I talked my way through that. Wow. Anything to avoid any sort of self-reflection and accountability. And it's just interesting to me that her videos will stand. I mean, she completely contradicts herself. She's a liar. She really is. She's a liar. She's a fake. She's a phony. And I have a huge problem with her. And what makes me really sad about that is I have also no hesitation in saying, even though I just hesitated, that she's a trauma survivor and that somebody damaged her greatly. It's just, I see so many problems in her. And I think she takes away from a lot of us who are also domestic violence survivors because she wrote a book about being a survivor. And I wonder when she wrote that book, how she handled that with her adult offspring as well. I wrote a book about my childhood experiences, and I had long talks with my children before I published that book. And actually they helped edit it. Two of my kids helped, two of my adults, they're not kids, helped edit my book, and they wrote the foreword. And I did it with their support. And I can tell you that as much as I want to live my life the way that I want to live my life, I will forever be their parent. And I have an accountability and a responsibility to them. And if they had said, you know what, Mom, we're really uncomfortable with this, I wouldn't have published it. I just wouldn't have. Thankfully, that's not the case. I wouldn't do anything that would cause them harm. And I really wonder if some of the breakdown that's occurred has occurred because of how she is exposing their father. And I'm not saying that it's not her right to tell her story, to share her experiences. I don't get to judge that. I just do feel that as parents, we're supposed to have priorities, not because of the contractual agreement that we enter into when we decide to have children, but because that's just what parents innately, in my mind, should do. And what is the most important relationship we'll have? Well, there's two, right? The first and foremost is the relationship we have with ourselves, which as a therapist, that's the relationship I work on helping my client build, talking about self-love and all of that, loving of self. And the other relationship, which I think is equal to that, and they're intertwined, obviously, is the relationship that we have with our parents. That's our most important relationship. That's our relationship that forms our relationship that we have with ourselves or damages it, right? All right, I will leave you with that. Thoughts? Let me know what you think in the comments section. And by the way, I have a members section. If you want healing tips and journal prompts and things like that, click the join button. You can see what that's all about. Sorry, my video caught off for a minute there. My alarm was set because I have to get to other work today. If you would like to learn more about that, you can just click the join button. You can see what I have to offer. And if not, I'm here making videos all day long. Well, not all day long. It feels like all day long today for you. If there's something you would like to see, someone you'd like me to feature, just drop it in the comments section. There was a point in time where I was spending a lot of time in editing, blocking off their screen names and things like that. I'm going to ask you to not throw any hate their way. And that's why I was doing it. It's not my job to protect them, but I also don't want to, widen the gap in what feels like a war sometimes with these kinds of people. There are estranged parents out there who are not this, who can heal, who can repair, who do have the desire to take accountability. Relationships can be complicated. They shouldn't be difficult. That's not the same thing. And so I'm not going to be editing that out anymore just because this takes a lot of time, and it's just easier for me to do it in the fastest way possible to keep up with making sure I can provide you all with daily content. That's where it's at. If you notice, my shorts are old. They're from my TikTok and things like that. I'm focusing on long content, so it takes a lot. So the fact that the screen name and things are on there, yes, you can go look at their platforms if you want to and things like that. Let's think about the fact, though, do we want to boost their algorithm? And also, let's just really be always the person that you want to be proud of. And for me personally, I would not go on people's platforms and be mean or anything like that in the comment section. Would I make a comment that's constructive? Absolutely. So I'm just asking everybody to, lead with respect in the face of disrespect, because you need to be who you are and true to yourself. I don't let people hijack my character. Okay, I'm out. I'm rambling. See you soon. Thanks so much for being here.
The cowardice of cutting off. Going no contact with a parent who has offered nothing but love and support is not an act of courage. It is a quiet retreat disguised as awakening. A step taken not towards healing, but away from the discomfort of self-reflection. It's easier to hide behind fashionable language than to confront the complexity of one's own heart. Many call this distance healing, yet so often it's simply avoidance dressed in the vocabulary of modern therapy. These are not boundaries thoughtfully set. They are bridges deliberately burned. And the rising smoke, mistaken for freedom, is, in truth, the evidence of something precious lost. The voices in the background who encourage this severing, the influencers, the commentators, even some therapists, often do so not out of wisdom, but out of convenience. They feed on discontent, turning ordinary family struggles into narratives of pathology. In their hands, alienation becomes a trend, and estrangement a kind of performance. This culture of disconnection is a subtle toxin, or a poison, or a cancer. It elevates fragility, celebrates victimhood, and casts suspicion on the very people who once carried, protected, and sacrificed. What previous generations understood as the natural friction of family life, the imperfect exchanges that forged resilience, is now too quickly labeled as trauma, a word used to absolve rather than understand. And so, the silence grows, And first it feels like power, a reclaiming of space. But eventually, silence reveals its truer nature, not empowerment, but absence. A void where love, guidance, and history once lived. So perhaps the truth is simpler than we make it. Parents cannot be loved for the ideal we invent. They can only be loved for who they are, shaped by their own time, their own hardships, and their own imperfect humanity. That does not make them toxic. It simply makes them human. If this pattern continues, one must wonder, what will the next generation call their parents when the cycle turns? What monsters will they invent to avoid seeing themselves? God bless. Manipulative children are experts at twisting your words, twisting your intentions, twisting your memories. They'll say, "You're crazy. You always overreact. You're the problem." But this isn't truth, it's control. If a child constantly makes you doubt your reality, you're not unstable. You're being emotionally manipulated. Toxic children never take responsibility. Everything is your fault. Their emotions, their failures, their choices. Blame becomes their identity. But you can't carry their adulthood on your shoulders. They are responsible for their lives, not you. And unless they learn to take accountability for the abuse that they have delivered, they will never, ever have peace. This next topic is a little bit contradictory for me because it's about individual situations. They're not all the same and we cannot generalize. But if you have a very, very toxic child, don't feel bad about going no contact. Because at the end of the day, the child should be respecting the parent, not the other way around. A parent cannot respect a child who has no respect. It's impossible. The only thing that's going to happen is you're going to blow up. And then you blow up and they call you toxic. So people judge parents who go no contact, but don't really know the story. And nobody sees what they endured behind closed doors. If your child's behavior is destructive, abusive, or damaging, you have the right to protect yourself. You have the right to speak up. Parents don't deserve to be abused. They deserve emotional safety. There comes a moment where you reach your limit, not because you stopped loving your child, but because you stopped allowing their behavior to destroy you. That moment doesn't make you cruel, it makes you courageous. It's called self-respect. Today, children are going for therapy alone, and the therapist guides them and encourages them to cut off their parents. How on earth does a therapist give advice without even knowing the other person? Without even hearing what the other person has to say? A good therapist doesn't take sides. They guide understanding. They don't encourage silence and separation. They encourage clarity and repair. Therapy should be a place where families rebuild trust, not reinforce resentment and blame. If the goal is healing, then division should never be the strategy.